heterogeneous in our opinion.
If we do not renew our partnerships with the rest of the world, Europe will not be relevant.
We can make it if we are together as Europeans.
Do you genuinely believe that countries will manage to reach these very ambitious targets?
Good morning. My name is Oscar Williams. I'm the Technology and Trade Editor for Politico in London. And you're watching Politico Live, the live extension of our non-partisan journalism. Employees around the world are already benefiting from using AI systems, both to get work done faster and to upskill. But at an economy-wide level, clearly automation is a looming concern. The EU has spearheaded AI policymaking with its landmark AI Act, but what can be done to best safeguard employment without hampering innovation? That's the big question that we're looking to answer in this panel this morning, with our star-studded list of speakers. But first things first, I would like to thank our sponsor, ABSL, for making this event possible, and extend a warm thank you to all of you for joining us both in person and online this morning. We'd really like to make this session as interactive as possible. You can participate by tweeting about it. Our Twitter account is @livepolitico, and ask questions through Slido, that's sli.do, using the hashtag AI at work. We'll be prioritizing questions which are sent with a name and organization, so it's clear for all our viewers and panelists, so please do be upfront about that. And you can share your thoughts and answer the following poll, also via Slido. The poll question that we're looking to answer today is, what do you think is the biggest impacts of AI on the workplace? There are a few options there to run through, and we'll be looking at the results at the end of our panel. Now, let's get right into it with our key panelists on this topic, and please join me in welcoming to the stage multi-industry executive and board member John Hinshaw, and Carme Artigas, Senior Fellow at Harvard's Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs. Joining us online are Maria de Rosario Palma Ramalho, Portugal's Minister of Labour, Solidarity and Social Security. And last but not least, Manuela Galeng, Director of Jobs and Skills at the European Commission. Please join me in giving them a warm welcome too. John, I wanted to sort of send the first question your way. You've spent a lot of time thinking about some of the issues that we'll be discussing today. Finance is obviously a hugely sort of data-rich industry, and that really lends itself to automation. Could you tell us a little bit, just to get us going, about how impactful you think this technology will be, and a sense of what AI will mean for the kinds of sort of major banks and financial organizations that you've worked for?
Yeah, look, it's not just banks and financial institutions. Every single company in the world will be impacted by AI in some form or fashion, just like we were all impacted as various technology revolutions have happened, be it, you know, the PC age, the internet age, et cetera. And it's already happening. I mean, you are all using AI, whether you know it or not, in the searches you do, in some of the emails you write, in some of the communications that you receive on a daily basis. And that's just going to continue to accelerate. I think the most important thing to know for this audience is you all are responsible for thousands, tens of thousands, I think, what do we say, 40 million workers in some form or fashion just in Europe, or 38, soon to be 40, I think the numbers were. How are you thinking about retraining them for this future AI? If they just sit steady, you know, as technology always has, then they will be at risk. But if they're being retrained to use these skills to be more productive, as the question just asked, then I think there's tremendous opportunity. And I think this is all about how companies grow and service customers better with better products. And that's what AI can enable. And I know we'll get into more of that throughout the discussion today.
Thank you, John. Maria, I was going to point the next question in your direction. I wondered if you could give us a sense at a sort of slightly broader level. at a sort of economy-wide level, a country of Portugal's sort of size, what do you think at the top level AI will mean for the labour market and growth over the coming years?
Well, hello, Oscar. First of all, I would like to congratulate the ABSL for the organization of this event. This is a very important topic, of course. I would say that for Portugal, as for all developed countries, artificial intelligence will be a challenge, really a challenge, in both in two main directions, in my view. On the one hand, artificial intelligence makes it possible for new forms of work, both as new forms of employment relations, but also independent work and the contractors. So this is a new challenge, and it's necessary to adapt labor legislation, employment legislation that is still very much based in traditional work, factory work or something like that. But on the other hand, there's a huge impact and immediate impact in employment relations, even in traditional employment relations. Today, you don't hire people in the same way. You have to go to algorithmic or other, artificial intelligence tools. Working arrangements are not made in the same way as regards working time or workplace. Everything impacts the personal data, job evaluation. We have to adapt to all those differences, and it's still very much to be seen whether this will create more jobs or will eliminate jobs that are there, and what jobs will be more impacted by these technologies. So we have a big issue to solve here, I think.
Thank you very much, Maria. Miguel, does that sort of chime with your view? You're sort of one stage further removed, I guess, at the Commission, but do you sort of agree with that perspective that we're yet to see what the sort of longer-term consequences will be for the overall sort of job market?
Well, I think yes, I do agree. What we are seeing now that AI has been more labor enhancing that rather than labor replacing. However, the pace of change is very fast, and we'll have to see how this pans out in the medium term and the long term. So it's much more difficult to say how things will look in the future, in the near future. And I do think that preparedness is the word.
Thank you. Carme, turning to you, what steps do you think employers can take to sort of maximize the benefits and minimize the risk for employees?
Hello? Yes? So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this event. I think that my colleague has put it in the right framework. I mean, AI is an ubiquitous technology that will affect, no doubt, all vertical sectors, without exception. But it has a unique characteristic versus other technology revolutions. First of all, is the fast, I would say the level of hyper-automation that we're going to witness in the industry in the following 2 to 5 years will define the winners and losers of the next 2 decades. The important part is that this will not happen overnight, and it will have different effects depending on the value chain. So not all the jobs, all the sectors will be affected, but not all the jobs will be affected in the same way. And I would say we have 3 situations here. Those jobs that will be replaced by automation, those jobs where technology can be a complementary tool to gain efficiency and optimization, and those where the technology will really augment the capacities of humans. And in these 3 scenarios, I encourage that everyone should review inside their companies What are the jobs or the positions that will replace and automate? They need to plan a reskilling program, because those skills are no longer useful. You need to reskill the people. For those who would use that as a co-pilot, as a complement, then you need to upskill. And those who would really have the opportunity, and we see that not in the low-level jobs, but in the high-level jobs, like researchers, programmers, in the pharmaceutical industry, for example, that you need to augment and cross-hybridrate new skills from other sectors. So it will not happen overnight. We can plan it ahead. And the first short, I would say, time effect will be the opposite. Because it's like all of a sudden tomorrow you need to welcome 150 interns in your company. I mean, you are saturated. That's what's happened now. Now you need to start a project on generative AI. All of a sudden you are absolutely overwhelmed. But in the long run, that will be replaced on parts of this value chain. The risk here is that the benefits and the costs are not equally distributed among the different, I would say, social classes or different countries, because at the same time we are here, there are 100,000 people, thousands of people in Africa watching the content we don't want to watch, watching violence images or not acceptable image to train the AI filters so we do not see them. So let's see that we really are not leaving ourselves in the low-level jobs while the high-level jobs are replaced by AI.
You know, Oscar, one other thing for this audience to think about that I've seen in industry is the speed at which a new employee can be productive to the level of a very senior employee is very different when empowered by AI. And it's going to kind of blow up the traditional, okay, you do this job for 2 years, do this next job for 3 years, next job for 3 years, then maybe you'll be a senior. You know, you give them 6 months with the right tools and they can be doing things people have been doing for 10 or 20 years. That's especially true in the programming code creation area, where you can take a fairly junior person who really masters code, you know, the Copilot and some of the code library capabilities, and they can be a more efficient coder than somebody who's been coding for 30 years right out of the gate. So that is going to change some of the dynamics on how you recruit people and how you promote people and how you compensate people, and something nobody's quite figured out yet.
And for employees who haven't necessarily yet sort of grasped the opportunities ahead of them, what sort of steps, do you think there are any sort of practical examples that you could talk about that encourage people to see this as an opportunity?
Well, it's like anything in life. You can either be scared of it or you can embrace it and go try to figure it out and be curious about it. And, you know, there's tons of reading and learning, and every company's providing training now. Like we've all been certified in things over the years. I think employees need to both take it on themselves to learn as much as they can, but also take advantage of what companies are providing. I know all of you and your companies are providing AI training and skills, and you see some employees embracing it and learning and wanting more, and others sort of shying away from it.
Carmen, are there any examples that you've sort of seen implemented in workplaces, you know, through your work that you think have been particularly effective?
I would say that probably one of the verticals I can think about where this is very well implemented in all these 3 different fashions I've just mentioned is probably the health sector and pharmaceutical industry. Pharmaceutical industry is using AI really to augment their capacities to discover new drugs with tools like AlphaFold, which has really, you know, blown up the possibility of the research in new strategies different that the humans use. Because this is not thinking, they don't think, but it's not finding the same strategies that we human beings are using. So it's absolutely complementary, and we can reduce really the cost of R&D 60%. But at the same time, you see, like, for example, in hospitals, and I recall the example of the hospital in Chicago, they're using a doctor chatbot to support and the things that the doctors don't have time to do, like attending the families and reporting the results, and also on the I would say the technician side of the industry. So in more tools which really improve the detection of cancer for for image identification. So that's an example when you can replace humans in some tasks you don't want to do, on areas when you improve your capacity of detection and personalized medicine programs and treatments, and the other when you really augment human capabilities, because thanks to AI you can process much more data and have new strategies of thought.
Thank you. Maria, I wanted to send the next question your way. I would be really keen to get a sense from you of how involved you think government should be in sort of trying to safeguard existing work, embrace new work, and how they sort of get the balance right there.
Okay, I think that government, of course, must be involved, because on one hand, you cannot say that these new realities do not exist. So you have really to adapt. You must adapt the legislation and whatever the public service, public inspection services and everything to these new ways of working. But on the other hand, I think that we have to be firm in protecting workers from the new dangers that are entailed in these new forms of work. On the one hand, we have to be sure that technology is not leading the process entirely, and that humans have something to say about it. If you take, for instance, job evaluation, when it is done by algorithmic or other artificial intelligence tools, it is necessary that the worker can be informed of what is happening, what are the patterns of evaluation, and that he can appeal to another instance. For instance, when you, for instance, have to deal with working from a distance, you have to clearly to be firm in guaranteeing that, for instance, the working time is clearly different from other times of life, from private life. We have seen in the COVID with the dissemination of remote work that the frontier between working time and other hours, private life, is no longer as clearly established as it is when you go to your company and when you come back home. So really, we have to adapt. This is true. This is necessary. But also, we have to be aware of the new dangers for the workers that come out of these new ways of work in many areas, such as hiring, discrimination, reconciling of working time and family time and the private life, workers' evaluation, also health and safety of the worker. You don't get so easily control, for instance, where does the employee works. If he works at his home, labor inspection service do not go there and see, well, is he okay, does he work at 1 in the morning or in the afternoon. So and finally, the danger of a growing isolation and individualization of the worker. So collective worker relations do not happen as easily as it was. So we have to go both ways, and if we go both ways, we will have the balance.
And a sort of similar question to you, Manuela. I wanted to get a sense of how involved and sort of interventionist you think the European Commission and other sort of national governments should be on this issue?
Well, I think that it's important that in society and in the economy there is a positive perception of what AI can bring, and therefore it's important to focus on the challenges, right? Because it's all about having the good balance, as the minister was saying, about enabling industry and AI to develop, at the same time making sure that workers feel protected. Now here in Europe, we have already a substantial labor law framework, And most recently, we have adopted the AI Act and the Platform Work Directive. So clearly, the approach that the European Union has taken is the one of having the human in control. So it's really important that people and workers have the feeling that what is important for them, there will be a human in control. So a human-centered approach and development of AI.
Thank you. John, do you agree with that? Do you think governments should sort of prioritize a human-centered approach to AI, or do you think?
I think it depends on the use case. Certainly, let's just take financial services as an example. Always banks and other financial firms have worked with governments and regulators on the modeling that they do, whether it's a credit analysis for a loan or concentration of customers in certain markets or whatever. And AI will continue to be important that companies work with governments and regulators to understand the models behind the decisions, and so that it isn't biased and that it's clear. And that, candidly, the folks in this room need to be proactive to reach out and work with your regulators and governments on that, not wait for them to come and add legislation or whatever. It should be a collaborative process from the beginning. But there's also a different paradigm here completely. And I'm curious in the audience, how many of you have actual AI agents working as part of your workforce today? Got a handful. I'm going to just, prognosticate a year or two from now, every hand will be up here. And you'll have your employees in Poland, your employees in Portugal, your employees in wherever. And let's say you've got 20,000 employees. Then you'll have another 10,000 or whatever the number may be, AI agents that are doing 24/7, doing a lot of tasks. I watched this live earlier this week in London. I was with a startup company called PolyAI, and they're working with a cruise line, and showed me a live agent call where the AI agent answered the call. The person had booked a cruise but forgot to book their coach bus service to get to the cruise. You couldn't figure that out online. This AI agent did all of that for them, without any human being be there. And that's a small use case, but there'll be many, many more of those. And all of you will have to manage this human workforce and this AI agent workforce and figure out what tasks go where, et cetera. But certainly the things that are complex and affect people's lives, affect people's financial decisions, back to the previous comment, I think we'll need a human in the loop to be sure that there isn't bias, that this actually is taking care of the customer the way it should be.
Do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I think on top of that, John, which is, I totally agree, we need to build trust. Because what happens here is that, especially in Europe, that we are not developing the fundamental technology which is behind, we really have an opportunity, because we have a very good industrial base, to adopt it massively into vertical areas where we are good at. I mean, the United Nations, I am from the United Nations. The United States is very good at certain things, and we are very good at other things. And the way digital works is only profitable if it's scalable and it's standardized. While we are in Europe, where we have diversity of knowledge, diversity of cultures and languages, which is very good for scientific research, but it's less good for the traditional way the digital market is approached, because just economy of scale, and they tend to standardize it. In order to make our values become better leaders, and we must invest in what we are good at, not in what the others are good at. And every time we invest in generative AI, we're underinvesting our renewable energies sector, our pharmaceutical sector, our deep tech sector. That's where I see the great opportunity of Europe, because that is based on fundamental scientific research. But of course, the return of investment of deep tech is not 2 years, like you can see in the digital sector. So we need to really be able to fund our scientific research and applications, because at the end of the day, what happens here is that we see ourselves that regulation is hampering innovation, and that's I can defend that, because I was the leading negotiator of the AI Act. That's the other way around. I think it's a great opportunity for Europe to build trust for consumers and for citizens so we can adopt it massively, because we cannot rely on the black box. If you are Airbus, or if you are your bank, are you going to trust in a black box if you don't know what's inside? I was yesterday having a beautiful dinner here in Porto, and I can ask for a stick tartare because I have no doubt that that restaurant has gone through all the health checks. And if I ask you, do you like to be regulated as a bank? You would say no. If I ask a pharmaceutical company, do you like to be regulated? But I can take a pill because I have no doubt that has gone all the process. So why are we treating the software industry differently? It's exactly the same. I need to know what's in the black box to allow for trust and therefore massive adoption from consumers. So while in the US you see the lawsuit of New York Times against OpenAI for copyright infringement, here Financial Times, Axel Springer, Le Monde, and Prisa have already sought their corpus of data to OpenAI to train. There is no possible liability here. So we need to use that as a way to guarantee adoption, because all these general AI tools are general purpose tools. They are like an operating system. You are not more competitive because you're using Linux or OS. You are more competitive in the way you are using those general purpose technologies to develop your own use cases with your own unique data to solve a problem for your market. And that example you share with us, it's a good example of a particular use case of a particular industry. And I think that's where Europe can be really good at.
John, do you agree that that's a sort of sensible way of dividing up the sort of prioritization of innovation between the sort of Europe and the US?
I mean, certainly there are different strengths, as Cornwell said. I think the trust element that you mentioned is absolutely critical, because there will be, and we've seen it with hallucinations and other things, where the black box gets it wrong, right? And if it's a minor situation, no big deal, right? If you're just doing a Google search and you get a wrong answer. In fact, if all of you do a Google search on yourself and some of these AI tools, you'll find out even information about you isn't right out there, right? Because they're pulling things with similar names and confusing things. But when it gets to things that are either life-threatening, financially important, that it has to be clear how that was actually created. Human beings, though, also make mistakes. And so at some point, when you're looking at these models and what's in them, when does the black box get actually better than the human being, and then is that okay, even if it's not perfect? I think that's a question. But
the point is that there is opacity. I mean, if I make a mistake, I'm accountable. The problem is, who is accountable if something goes wrong? And the reason is that for the first time ever, this technology has not been developed by the academia or the scientists. It has been developed in the R&D centers of private companies. Why? Because they had access to data. And we need to ask for transparency, and this is why in the UN we're proposing a scientific panel to really be aware of the risks, but also of the opportunities. Because without transparency, there is no accountability.
Thank you both. I wanted to put some of that to the Minister and the Commission as well. Maria, perhaps we could turn to you first. Are you worried at all about the dominance of sort of American tech firms in the AI market? Obviously, there are a few European companies that are doing well in this space, but the majority of vendors are based on the West Coast, in places like San Francisco. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that and what it means for the EU.
Well, this is all a new world, a brave new world. Just let's hope that it will not end like the brave new world that we have all read in the book. So I think that indeed we have to adapt and to build both trust, as it was said already, but also accountability. And to have accountability, we must have transparency. I think that if I can put forward the Portuguese example, many employers are using AI tools, and sometimes I think that some of them may not even be conscious of what is involved, because they don't prepare, it's not them who prepare and who overlook the data that they are using. So if a discriminatory result comes out of that use, they will say, I didn't know, I didn't see it, and it's completely different from accountability when it is based in human action. So it's not so transparent, and building trust will be more difficult. And also, you have to think that artificial intelligence moves very, very fast. It moves faster than legislation. So we have, it was said before that it's not overnight that we have to change, but really, I think that artificial intelligence really moves very, very quickly. So we have to be aware that we humans must be in control. And it's important to say that the European Union was the first to come out, for example, with the Platform Work Directive, as it was already said, that really says that human must still be in control. So, of course, you may have to look, when you look at a new phenomena, you can say that, of course, the glass is almost empty or almost full. It's the same glass. It's a question of perspective, and I'm very optimistic. But I'm also aware that the challenges are there, and they're difficult to be met because it goes on much faster than legislation does, and we have to be aware of all that to make the balance.
Thank you. Manuela, do you want to come in on that point as well? I mean, I'd be really interested in hearing your thoughts on the sort of state of the sector and the AI vendors and that split between the US and Europe on this.
Well, I think we have discussed with the US in the context of the Trade and Technology Council all of these issues that affect in the context of AI. We have also done studies together. We have also looked at skills together, and I think it was a great experience because we could really exchange our practices and learn from each other. From the European perspective, I think what is really important is of course that when we speak about labor market, there is transparency, accountability, fairness, that when it comes to recruitment or work management practices, that they are that privacy and non-discrimination is ensured, so that no bias can arise. And I also think that in the European model, the collaboration between employers and workers is important in managing any of these risks that may arise, and social dialogue has a specific role to play in that context.
Thank you. Carmo, we were talking earlier briefly about the results of the US election and what that might mean for the way in which the industry lobbies around the AI Act, particularly if President-elect Trump ends up repealing the executive order that was issued by the White House under the Biden administration. Is that something you're sort of looking at the moment and thinking about in the context of your work around the AI Act?
Yeah, I think we have seen that recently, like 3 weeks ago, the California AI Act was vetoed by the senator as a result, of course, of the lobbies and the pressure of the high-tech sector. And of course, the Trump administration will certainly try to deregulate, and I would say that the executive order of Biden-Harris will not go farther, which will put a lot of pressure to Europe to slow down the adoption of the AI Act. And I think we shouldn't do that, because that's really the way we can defend ourselves, and we can really be more competitive if we really define the rules of the game of our market. The problem is that we are not acting as one single market. So the problem of Europe has not been regulation, it has been regulative fragmentation. The AI Act, the DSA, the DMA are acts. That means it's one regulation for 27 member states at the time. If we use the power of 400 million Europeans, that's a market nobody can renounce to. And I think we need to encourage that we work really as Europe. It's a wake-up call for Europe, especially in the digital market. And I think it's a wake-up call also for the next Commissioner of Competency, the Spaniard, Teresa Rivera, in that we need to look at the digital sector, we need to have European champions. We need more critical mass of our companies. Sometimes the competency strategy has been, oh, I'm not allowing this merger because that's too big for Europe. Okay, it can be too big for Europe, but too small for the world. So in especially the digital sector, it's not the same. It's not the same to compete in the market, which is I want to find in my supermarket both Coca-Cola and Pepsi, that to compete for the market, which is what's happening now. That's number one. Second, in order to be competitive in the digital sector, we must act as a one single digital market, as Enrico Letta and Draghi has already recommended, but we need to really have much more access to funding in the big rounds. And from the public perspective, this is right, I mean, from the Commission programs and the European Investment Bank and European Investment Fund, but we lack the involvement of the private sector on European companies. Because what happens is that European financial institutions are sending our money to invest in the American funds that later come back to Europe to acquire our companies. And I think it's about 300 billion that was stated by Draghi, European money that goes to the state, and then they are the first acquirers of our company in the scale-up phases. So I would say, I would rephrase something that former Minister Arantxa González Laya says. Trump is not the solution to European, Harris was not the solution to European problems, and Trump is not the cause of our European problems. We have our problems, we need to solve it ourselves.
John?
Yeah, I think that's right. I will say, though, that I don't think any of us know yet how radical this new Trump administration is going to be. What we do know is that when he won in 2016, it was sort of a surprise to him, and it took a little while to get things going. We know that he didn't believe he lost in 2020, and he's been spending the last 4 years getting ready to take over. We know that he's aligned himself very closely with Elon Musk as his #1 backer, his #1 confidant, his new Department of Government Efficiency organization, coincidentally Doge, for Dogecoin. But what we don't know yet is what does that mean for regulation. We know in general there'll be less regulation in a Trump versus Biden-Harris. We don't know, though, how they're going to approach AI yet. But Elon Musk, who in one sense has said, oh my God, AI is scary, let's shut it all down, and then the next day starts up a $40 billion AI startup to compete with Sam Altman. So there's a lot of unknown, I think, in 2 days out of the Trump administration winning. But I do think it will be more extreme than what we've seen in the past, whatever it may be, and how that plays into the speed of AI that we're talking about with a more extreme administration. I think, to your point, EU's got to figure out what they want to do irrespective and protect the citizens of the EU, as does every other country, all the while figuring out how to interact with what is very uncertain now going forward in the US.
I just wanted to add that in what we know is that there's going to be a very important arms race, AI arms race between the US and China, and that there is, following 2 years' time, the priority of US administration and the US companies is to acquire the sources of energy that allow for the AI industry to evolve. And so the geopolitical implications of that are huge. Where are they going to place the data centers? How is Europe going to react? And also on the acquisition of talent. So in order for the US to keep the leadership on the AI race versus China, the level of acquisition of talent, and that's why we need to protect our talent, not protect them because we don't want them to evolve, give them the reasons why they can evolve. And I like very much Enrico Letta, I think it's going to be here, that says when we were defining the principles of European Union, we said the right to move. Probably now we need to rephrase it, the right to stay. Because I want that my talent stays in Europe. And I think that's what we need to figure out how to solve.
And I do think to that point, where the EU probably has an advantage at the moment is this right to stay, or even the right to attract talent. I mean, some of the new tax policies that the EU has established in certain countries are attracting talent, where at the moment, at least some of the rhetoric out of the US is close the borders, keep people out, America first. That's not the way the world works. You want people to want to come to your country, to bring their intellectual property, to create companies. And I think in many ways the EU's done a good job of that. Certainly certain countries have in the past year or so.
Manuela, just before we move on to the Q&A, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to come back on any of that.
Well, I think maybe I would like to come back on the issue of talent, because I think skills will be one of the make or break aspects for the workforce. And I do think that we will have to be proactive rather than reactive, because I think if we want to make sure that AI is developed and deployed, we will need to make sure that there are people with the right skills. And this is really an issue where many companies in Europe say they don't find the right skills, so they are hampered in their investment because they don't have the right skills. So yes, there is a global race for talent, and in Europe we have been very much focused on skills. This last time we just concluded a year about on European Year on Skills, where we put the focus on this issue that we need to keep our skills updated, and I think this is benefiting both the people but also the companies.
Thank you. Maria, a question to you from Michael Sobal, who, and this touches on a point that you were making earlier about sort of worker surveillance. The question is how to design AI at work to support workers' autonomy. I wondered if you'd done any thinking within the ministry around that as an issue.
This is, of course, an issue. We have to guarantee that when worker surveillance is done throughout a machine or AI tool, the worker has to be informed that first it is there, and second, if the job evaluation is made over objective patterns, if they're there too, if it does not involve a discriminatory factor, because it is known that artificial intelligence, algorithmic tools are of course based in the past, so in culture, so discrimination risks to be higher when you use artificial intelligence tools than if you use, if it is done by human. Also that worker surveillance performed by these tools does not invade the privacy of workers. For instance, a camera that is always on, or if you have a computer that cannot be switched off at a certain moment. So all this must be ensured by the legislation, and also, of course, the right of the employee to complain or to present a claim over to his employer to say, well, this is not. What's the base of this? Of this evaluation result? So, again, it is important to ground that humans are over the machines and not the other way around. But it's very difficult to adapt the legislation to this challenge. But I think it is vital, this one.
Thank you. Another question from Michelle, and John, this might be one for you. Do you think that with the use of AI, employment relationships will be characterized by a diligent performance, changing into relationships that are based on results instead?
I think always employment relationships should be based on results. So I don't think that will change per se, but I do think it'll be more dynamic in that, often companies, you start the year, okay, here's your objectives for the year, and then do you meet your objectives, your OKRs, et cetera. In the world of AI, that's going to change a lot faster, and it may be less about, well, these are your objectives, and more about how fast can you learn this technology to actually make a difference in the job that you're doing, which is more subjective than you'd find in a normal performance review, especially as you get higher up in organizations.
That'll be interesting. Carmen, the current top-ranked question is probably one that we should send your way. Do you envisage an over-regulation of AI use in the future?
No, I don't think we are over-regulating AI at all. First of all, because we are not regulating AI. The AI Act does not regulate AI. It only regulates the high-risk use cases of AI. So there is a risk-based matrix and a product-based legislation. And what is a high-risk application of AI? Anything that affects safety, but then you apply all the vertical safety regulations you already have. You are not reinventing the wheel here. Anything that affects health, again, you apply the health regulation. And anything that can affect fundamental rights in what we call high-risk domains. And what are these high-risk domains? Workplace, the school, the use of AI by the judicial system. Because we don't try to pretend to regulate only the companies or limit their capacity of innovation. We are regulating along the value chain. It's a different responsibility if you are the development of a general purpose, the implementer of that general purpose system in a vertical, or the user. And we also regulate the use or the potential harm that the governments or potentially authoritative regimes would use of AI to really erode our fundamental rights. So it's a matrix-based and risk-based technology. And in the workspace, it's already covered that there are prohibited use cases like the surveillance of workers, except for safety reasons, like a truck driver, that you need to be aware that he's going to fall asleep. But I think that's a very good balance. And there was no question of that until the ChatGPT moment arrived, because then when generative AI came to scene, everybody was thinking, okay, should we regulate generative AI? We say, no, we cannot regulate the general purpose technology, but we should ask for transparency. So I think that is the right balance we should keep. And at the same time, we have a lot of provisions for innovation, like real-time, real-world testing scenarios, like sandboxes, and we should get advantage to that.
Thank you very much. I think we're nearly out of time. So with that, I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of our panelists for a fascinating discussion.
Can I make a recommendation for the audience of a book that's worth listening to or reading on this topic, written by Stephen Albrecht, who is a lawyer and also a technologist. It's called Future Proof. And it basically looks at the impact of AI 30 years from now and focuses specifically on the legal industry and how lawyers will all be gone, they'll all be automated, and what that means. It's a fun read, but it's also a thought-provoking read on what could happen. So it's called Future Proof by Stephen Albrecht, and worth a read.
Thank you. We'll just take a look at the results of the poll that we've been running during the course of the panel. So as you remember, the question is, what is the biggest impact of AI on the workplace? And we can see that the overwhelming result from the audience is that it will boost productivity and growth, followed by create new skills and jobs, replace workers via automation, and reduce bias and discrimination. So that's a pretty positive response. Finally, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us in line and in person, and of course to our partner, ABSL, for making this event possible. We'd always love to hear your feedback on these events, so feel free to email us. We are live at politico.eu. And finally, you can check our Politico events website for the latest lineup on all our events happening this year to hear from experts on the latest policy and politics news. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
If we do not renew our partnerships with the rest of the world, Europe will not be relevant.
We can make it if we are together as Europeans.
genuinely believe that countries will manage to reach these very ambitious targets?